Greetings, my name is Tom Dickelman, and with me today are the Reverend Sean Miller and Dr. Matthew Dewar, and we welcome you to A Spirited Take, where we tackle all kinds of stuff relating to life and faith. And today we consider the second of 4 Advent themes, peace. So when I write letters and send emails, I typically end those letters and emails by writing or typing peace followed by my name. And so I wondered, why is it that I choose that? Of all the different options to close my letters, what am I really trying to say? And I think it's to the person I'm sending the letter to, I hope that you're blessed with a kind of inner evenness and maybe even tranquility. So Matt and Sean, what do you think? Is peace kind of an inner state of mind, or is it a reflection of external circumstances? Why don't we start with you, Matt?
I think initially, for most of us, we experience peace as the result of the confluence of certain external factors that then allow us to create this internal state. I think when you're developing any kind of practice where you're looking to take more ownership and agency over the trajectory of your life, that you start to learn to connect internal states with internal and external conditions. And that awareness then allows you to start to more skillfully manage your internal conditions and external conditions so that you can create peace within yourself rather than it just kind of being spontaneously and randomly created by the things going on around you, if that makes any sense. I think it's a sign of maturity. I think a sign of maturity of a person is learning to deliberately and intentionally cultivate peace rather than just kind of waiting for moments of peace to just arrive.
So it's a result that is maintained via practice? Is that a short way of saying what you just said? A result of external circumstances, and over time as we mature, we learn how to cultivate and manage that, and then we develop this practice that brings us peace.
I think the movement of maturity is that as we're less mature, peace is an outside-in phenomenon. And I think as we become more mature, it becomes an inside-out phenomenon.
Well, let me, before I ask Sean a question, for all the people out there who every time you say the word agency, and they think about the local moving company, the Mayflower Moving Agency or something like that. When you use the word agency, what is it you exactly mean?
Self-direction. Agency just means that you are self-directing whatever. You're ultimately, in the most general sense, you're self-directing your own life. Think of someone at the helm of a ship. Right? They're consciously making decisions to interpret the wind, set the sail, turn the wheel, the rudder, and aim towards a desired port. And so using that analogy, when you have agency, you're consciously paying attention to the various factors within yourself and outside of yourself in your life so that you consciously can direct your life towards outcomes that you find personally fulfilling and meaningful.
Which is hugely relevant in the pursuit of personal peace.
Absolutely. And whether we realize it consciously or not, we are very much, our nervous system is fundamentally motivated to seek peace because peace is very much associated with safety and kind of the basic programming of our nervous system. You know, in computer programming, they talk about the simple binary of 1 and 0, and all computer programming comes from different combinations of 1 and 0. And so when you think about the nervous system and all the different internal experiences and emotions that we have, it's really based off the simple binary of safety and threat. And so when you can identify what safety is for you and what affronts your sense of safety, and how this plays out within your internal states, and then how those internal states ultimately dictate your behavioral patterns, you can start intervening in that process and make it more conscious so that you're able to feel safety and peace on a more regular basis because of conscious choices that you're making.
So Sean, in terms of conscious choices that we make to cultivate peace in our own lives, as a minister, as a person of faith, what are some of the things that people can do to cultivate peace for themselves?
Yeah, this is a great question, actually. I'm thinking a lot about some of the things that Matt has said. I think when you said the topic was going to be peace, I immediately thought of peacemakers, how Jesus says, blessed are peacemakers. And this goes along with what Matt says, that, peace requires you to use your agency, right, to make peace. Peace doesn't come to you passively. Blessed are the peacemakers. So then what does that mean for me to make peace? Well, I'm not bringing together Israelis and Palestinians. I'm not working peace on a global scale, but what are the relationships that need peacemaking that I can take an active role in? What role am I taking in making peace in a very fractious, broken, polarized time? That probably starts around the dinner table. It probably starts around the coffee, clutch over Zoom or however we do that. So that's got me thinking about, what is my sort of responsibility in making peace? Because if it is a blessing to receive peace, Jesus says it's a blessing to be one who makes peace. And that's effort, and that's hard in a very fractious time, polarized politically and otherwise. So I don't know that I have an answer, but that's one of the kind of my Advent questions, what am I doing to make peace?
Can I pick up on that real quick, Tom?
Please.
One of and this is something that the Buddhist tradition has just done so well, is that one of the preconditions for peace, deep peace in the sense that we're talking about, is stillness and silence. And we've created a hyper-evaluative culture where our worth is contingent on productivity. And productivity is constantly moving and doing. And so we've developed this aversion to stillness and quiet so that we don't feel safe being still and quiet, because we fundamentally feel that our value as a human being is being affronted by being still and quiet because we're not being productive. And so how can you explain to the evaluative forces what you're doing when you're still and quiet, right? And so until people can reclaim stillness and quiet, they'll never really be able to reclaim peace. And so when we look at peace, I think one way of thinking about it is what are the factors that are leading to it, and then to what end does peace serve? And so I think stillness and silence and developing safety and comfort in being still and quiet is kind of a precondition for a deep sense of inner peace. And then that deep peace it becomes a platform for insight. That when we truly are experiencing calm within ourselves, we're able to entertain perspectives about ourselves and our lives and others that are more congruent with our highest sense of value. And these are, this congruency is so important, but it's like the first thing to go when we start getting stressed out and we start living in this evaluative world, is that we forget what we most value, and we forget the insights that come with that. And so I think to get peace, we have to reclaim stillness and quiet. And then in experiencing peace, we can then see again what we value and remember why it's so important and why we actually do value it and why it's so important to orient our lives around core values.
Well, let me make you both uncomfortable, and I'll chime in a little bit. Not that that's the first time I've made you uncomfortable, but do you feel like in your own life that you have peace? And if so, what do you attribute that peace to? Sean? Let's start with you. We'll give Matt a chance to think about his agency. And
I would say that generally speaking, I hope to have peace, but I don't have peace I don't necessarily feel like I wake up and I have peace, either an inner peace or sort of a peace in all relationships and in the world. I feel unsettled a lot these days. I feel I feel like I am sort of hosting the anxiety that's all around me. Whether it's, if I don't work out, I feel extra stressed, or I'm feeling extra uneasy about things, and that's not peace. And the only way I know to move through that is to move through that, and to know that tomorrow is another day. But I would be pretty honest to say I don't necessarily feel a great sense of peace. I try to do things, take on spiritual practices that would promote more peace. But today, in the middle of this season, in the middle of this big season of the world that we're living in, I don't necessarily feel that much peace.
I so respect your honesty and greatly appreciate it, and the whole notion of hosting rather the angst and anxiety and all that's going on around us, I think goes with the ministry in large part, and certainly some other helping professions. Matt, what about you? Feel like you have peace?
I do. Not all the time, but I know exactly where to find it and how to find it. And I think that's the product of having been very miserable for a long period of time, especially as a young adult, and chasing an idea of peace to the other side of the world. And I know many people who are in this community who are watching this know that I dropped out of college and without telling my parents, and got on a plane to go live in a Buddhist monastery, and basically flunked out of enlightenment and got kicked out of a monastery after 4.5 months for sneaking out to eat pizza every night. So I was a terribly, horribly anxious person, with episodes of depression and just really unhappy in my skin. And I'm so grateful that I, for probably 10 years, went through that, because it forced me to, early on in life, to really think about and value peace and being comfortable in your own skin. And the reason why I do the work that I do is 100% motivated by the fact that for so much of my life early on, the wellness principles and ideas that I now espouse, I felt very distant from them. And so it forced me to develop a daily practice where I had to confront these things. And so I would say absolutely on a daily basis, at the beginning of every day and at the end of every day, for the most part, I am able to create a deep sense of connection and calm and peace. And that's taken years and years of practice to do that. And everything that happens in a day in between the beginning and the end might not be filled with peace and calm or an absence of stress. But I know that when I'm going through the storms of the middle of the day and the stressors, I know where my harbor is, and I know how to get back there. And I don't feel lost or swept away in a current or undertow of stress. I know exactly where I'm going to be arriving and what I'm going to do when I get there. And that's really, it's really helped me out So yeah.
I so appreciate both of your candor. Big time. Thank you. Matt, you're kind of a poster child in a way for what we talked about in the prior episode.
For ADD?
Which is hope. For ADD. A poster child for hope, because you were at a place where peace was so elusive and you continued to pursue it and developed practices in your life that come to the place where it's not like you're Mr. Peaceful 24/7, but it's there for you, and you found how to hang on to it and how to maintain it, which is, I think, what so many of us are seeking. For myself, I would say that I have more peace now in my life than I've had for a long, long time. And I think it's more than anything just keep trying and get to and recognizing that over time, maybe it's a maturity thing that you mentioned recently, but recognize that every time something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. And also recognizing that no matter what, I believe for myself that there is a God and that God loves me, and the sorts of mistakes that I have made and will continue to make doesn't impact that love. And to me, belonging to God is a key piece. And the more that I practice some of the spiritual practices within the Christian tradition, prayer being first and foremost, the more likely I am to feel that peace. So I didn't think it was fair to ask you guys a question like that without asking it myself. One or two other quick questions. Who's the most peace-filled person that you've ever met? Is there someone, when you think of peace, that pops into your mind as just exuding this kind of peace-filled presence? And what was it about them that was so unique? Sean, you're cackling.
Cackling.
Someone come to mind?
When I was a new associate minister, I overlapped for about a year with a woman named Rose Tall, who is a retired Presbyterian minister now. And for years, she ran the World Hunger Program for the denomination. Huge job, traveled all over the world, and went through a time when she had to put that job aside and take some time away. And then she went back into ministry, and I met her about 3 years before she retired. And she was not someone who you would necessarily think exuded peace in sort of a classic way. She and I would have a couple bourbons after work, or she would make a great spaghetti marinara, and I would enjoy that with her and her dog in her little apartment. And she could swear a blue streak if she really wanted to. But she had an unbelievable ability to say yes when she meant yes and say no when she meant no. She was clear in her speech. She knew who she was. She knew who she was not. She knew what her gifts were. She knew what her gifts were not. And she had this unbelievable ability to impact me and impact people in a big congregation simply by being her. And that, for me, is not a peace that is a woo peace, but it is a centeredness and a wholeness that someone I never thought I would have as such a good friend in ministry. Someone at that time who was 40 years older than me, but I miss her dearly, and I think about her when I think about peace, for sure.
Sweet. Matt, anyone come to mind?
Yes, and I want to say one thing before I mention two people. Going back to just the concept of peace, I think we experience peace in proportion to the amount of things we can let go of. And I think, speaking from my own personal experience, and I mentioned that I feel I know where to find peace, and I find it at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And at the end of the day in particular, if you imagine all day you're wearing a backpack and you're just filling that backpack with stuff, and it's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And for most of us, and for most of my life, especially as a young adult, I would go to sleep with that backpack on, and then I would wake up the next day with it, and then I would add more. And day after day, that thing just starts weighing you down. And so I think whatever this looks like for you, develop a practice at the end of the day where you can take stuff out of that backpack, where you can lighten the load, where you can consciously let go of things that you don't have control over, that you don't need to worry about, that you are overly fixated on, whatever it might be. And the more you practice, letting go is a skill. And it's difficult because we inherently want to hold on to things. And so in many ways, it's counter to our intuitions, which means you have to practice it. But the more you practice it, I think the easier letting go gets. And so there's nothing better than starting a day with an empty backpack, right? Every day's a good day when you wake up with an empty backpack. And as you feel, you're not perfect during the day. You're a human being. You get involved in affairs of the world, so on and so forth. But at night, you take time to take stock in what you've allowed to be placed in that backpack, and you take it out. You dump it out. You dump the contents out, and you let go of what you can. So that aside, two people, one just very practical. My grandfather on my dad's side was just, everyone, after he passed away, we were getting calls. We had a lake house up in McFarland, Wisconsin, outside of Madison. We were getting calls from like the car dealership up there, the grocery store. Everyone was like, your grandfather was the nicest man we've ever met. We heard that he passed away. We just want to say we're so sorry. He had this way of just connecting with people and putting them at ease. And he was just a wonderful presence to be around, and I wish I was more like him. I tend to take after more of my mom's side of the family, which is very Irish and a little crazy. So he was awesome.
Did you pick up on any of that, Matt?
Not at all.
I didn't think so.
But then when I went to Korea, I got to meet Daehang Kun Sunim, who is the head Zen master of the particular Zen order that I was practicing in. And she's one of the most famous Zen teachers in Korea of the second half of the 20th century. And I had two private audiences with her. Each one was over an hour. And despite the monks being very frustrated with me and some of my shenanigans, and they reported them to her, she was also very famous because she was a female Zen master, which wasn't the norm in Korea. So she broke a lot of barriers. She was very entertained by me for whatever reason, and we would engage in these conversations during these two meetings I had with her, and I can honestly say that I've never met in my life someone who had such an unshakable presence that you literally could just feel a groundedness and a level of insight and perspective that was just really impressive. And I'm not someone to like overstate things and be like, oh, this person has these magical qualities and stuff like that. It wasn't like that. It was just someone who is so grounded in their practice and in their understanding and insight into the world that no one has ever impressed me to that extent in terms of groundedness and peacefulness.
Thank you. You know, I'll wrap up with this. There's a gentleman I know who is in his 80s, and his name is Bill, and I spoke with him. He was talking about COVID, and he's talking about the latter stages of his life, and he goes, you know, this might be going on, and I may not see the end of this. And then he paused for a moment, and he smiled, and he goes, but you know what? I'm okay with that because I know where I'm going when I die. And for him, the peace that is present in his life amidst COVID and everything else under the sun is there because he believes in a life beyond this life. And as both you and Sean were talking, it struck me that there are so many different themes that we could get into on the topic of peace, whether it's the peace that people feel in having confidence or hope for life beyond this life, or the peace that people feel in the Christian tradition, knowing that we believe in a God and are embraced by a God who forgives us. Not to mention external kinds of peace, you know, peace in the world. So we'll tackle peace again. Sean, thank you very much. Matt, as always, thank you. Also want to say thanks to our technical dude, Ken Hall. We could not meet with 3 different cameras in different places and everything that's going on technologically were it not for Ken Hall. So thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, the Community Church. We look forward to seeing you again soon on A Spirited Take, and tell your friends. Have a great day.